and welcome to Spill the RT. I'm here with Josh. Josh, hi, how are you?
Hi, folks. I'm here with Eamon. Welcome to another week of exciting things. How's your week been, Eamon?
It's been great, but I asked you, how are you? How are you?
Ah, I made it to another day. Anytime I wake up, it's a good day as far as I'm concerned.
Which is every day is a new day. Every day is a working day.
Absolutely.
Oh, poor Josh.
What are you gonna do? You
I'm
got
wearing
bills,
I'm
you
wearing
gotta
the
pay
hat
them.
backwards again. I'm starting to think this might be the brand. What you
But you,
think?
but you, you color coordinated, so I appreciate that.
I
I
did.
like.
I did. The black mic, the white top, the black hoodie, the black,
See,
mm,
see, folks. 14 year
fashion,
old thinking it through, thinking it through.
fashionista. Josh, what's happened on today's show?
So this week, the New York gallery clothing slide continues. Should refugees have access to art? Another art Ponzi scheme ends at auction. LACMA chooses money over social change, and Tehran reveals a 30 artwork con job and theft. All that and a brand new guest are up next as we spill the art tea.
Spilling that tea, spilling that tea. That's a buster load of work that we need to get through, but it's all exciting. Lots of stories to discuss, and we have a really cool special guest all the way from Texas, USA. So, Jerry, are you ready to come onto the show? Here we go. Welcome, Jerry. How
Howdy,
are you
howdy from
doing?
Texas. I'm good. How are y'all?
Oh, good. Good. Y'all are doing great.
No, I'm very happy to be here with you all. It's going to be a really fun show, so I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Jerry, we have loads to learn about you as we go towards the end of the show, and we will learn all about your practice and the multi different facets that make that up. But for now, we're going to get on with spilling some tea. So, Josh, where are we heading to first?
First, we head to Manhattan, and it's a slide that we continue to document. We started talking about this a couple months ago when I
Mm.
first got wind that several hundred galleries around New York had closed since about this time last year. And well, this slide continued. Delhi Gallery, which was a well-known gallery for breaking new artists there in Manhattan, that just closed, and that joins Denny Gallery, JTT Gallery, Queer Thoughts, and a whole bunch of others that have closed very recently. And it's not just happening in New York, the same thing's beginning in parts of Europe. And what's
Mm.
happening is these people started their own places, right? They're now going out of business and they're being reconsolidated back into the larger places. And so you'll see an announcement 1 month about someone closing a gallery, and then 6 weeks later, they're now working for this other larger gallery, or they're working for a museum. Or so people are still managing to find work, but the kind of independent spirit has disappeared because the money has gone away.
Mm. Yes, and that's it is happening all across the world. It's definitely happening in London, where you would think that there'd be massive demand for these independent spaces. But what I found really kind of heartbreaking about this story was reading what their objectives were as a gallery to kind of promote new artists, and they were a real kind of champion of new artists, and to kind of see what the potential was out there, put them out and take those risks. And I'm sure that they will have those artists on their books now going forward, but it's definitely a difficult one to kind of try and kind of comprehend. Jerry, as a gallerist, where's your view on this?
Well, I think as a gallerist, our um, primary goal is really to provide a foot in the door for new artists. So
Mm,
I think this is a really important space for there to be available showing space to really highlight and give availability to young, new, and emerging artists who don't already have those kind of connections. It is a challenge. The economics are often a challenge. So, in my situation, I'm a medical doctor and an artist. So, I'm in a partnership with medical doctors, three others who are also medical doctors and artists.
wow, cool.
So, we are able to self fund our gallery, and we have a real heart and a vision for fostering and developing artists who are emerging, cutting edge, and need space to show. So, we're able to do that, but clearly, economics is always going to play a key role in this tension between what is art worth showing and we all need to see and has something
Mm,
really important for the culture versus you know what is able to sell, what and the economics that are available for people to buy. So it often coming and going up and down with the economy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, what this is Brownian motion, right? This kind of back and forth movement. But there's another way to kind of look at this, which is there has been now an increased explosion of collectives that are showing up in different places that are close to Manhattan, but not near Manhattan, close to Miami, but not actually in Miami, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the other part of that is, right, by not kind of giving into this idea that you have to end up in New York, it allows more community-based galleries like the one that you set up in San Diego, right, to actually be a kind of breaker of new art for the community that it's actually in, as opposed to worrying about, oh, I have to be seen by folks in Manhattan, otherwise somehow I don't have success. It just forces us to read what the art market should be, and that the gallery system doesn't work. People have been saying that for a long time, right? Well, that gives us then an opportunity. It's like an evolutionary tightening. Okay, now here's the expansion that comes afterwards.
Yeah, there's definitely a democratization that has happened with the internet, with social media, where artists can now develop audiences directly without going through a gallery system. I would say the gallery system still does play an important role in a sense. Um, Galleries are, in a way, trying to find needles in a haystack. Now there's so much clamor and so many artists, it's almost hard to find those that really have something truly meaningful to say to the culture. So there is almost like a filtering process in a way. I think that's necessary, at least in the historical past. We had this whole funnel system that ended up ultimately in our museums. Um, I think galleries, especially those that are looking for cutting edge artists that have something new and unique to show, are really important.
Mm.
There's just such a cacophony of things out on the internet. It's almost hard to look at so many millions and millions of possibilities, in other words.
Definitely, I think you spark a really interesting conversation there, and I mean, we're in abundance of saturated material and works that we are brought forward to by social media and by artists who maybe not have gone down the traditional route and have found themselves to be creatives or to be visual artists. And I think now I think a gallery's role has become even more difficult because of that saturation. But again, further to that as well, I think just within this story and kind of bringing it back a little bit, the funding that's required to sustain a gallery's space is so large and is increasingly so due to the cost of inflation that it's becoming impossible for them to try and even succeed. And without the likes of you, Jerry, who have other sources of private funding or private investment, it's becoming even more difficult for them to sustain themselves. And I see this now in Ireland as well, where there was a 500% increase of applications for public funding from the Arts Council. I was like, how can you even begin to manage that? How can you even begin to try and figure out how to overcome this and to be the beneficiary for these for the people who need this money, this funding? It's crazy.
I think, how do you decide also,
Yeah,
how do you choose who's worth funding and who's not? That's a challenge, difficult. We want there to be fair representation for everyone, but you still have to make hard choices sometimes.
definitely.
So I think in a way that's kind of our system as it has always been. There is a filtering and funneling process that is there really to, I mean, ultimately help define and understand the importance of art as it's kind of going filtering through that process. um, you know, a lot of art is purely decorative and beautiful, and people like it just because it's beautiful. But is that the kind of work that is going to speak to culture, is going to create something new that helps people think differently into the future, or have some poignant thing to say about
Yeah,
things happening in our culture?
yeah.
I mean, those are the pieces that are really important for all of us to
Mm.
know about. So,
I think just to kind of bring this story along, you talk about heritage there really, and I think our next story is about English heritage and about how the refugees that have come into the UK, especially at this point anyway, in relation to this story, they have launched a scheme in 2022 about how they would grant free access to refugees into different spaces like the heritage sites, galleries, museums, you name it, the different kind of places, and just trying to kind of give them, I don't know, opportunities to learn more about the heritage and the culture of the UK, and to kind of get them to understand that. Josh, you brought this story to the table? Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, I picked this not because it's UK specific, because this issue of refugees is around the world at this point,
Yes.
right? And so it's this question of, well, okay, who's entitled to culture? And so it doesn't matter about whether it's a specific scheme in one place. The question will still become who gets access to these things, right? And the logic to me is, well, does culture belong to one group, or does culture, as Jerry was kind of indicating, belong to all of us? And to me, this is a different kind of filtering mechanism, right? If we say to people, well, unless you're legitimate in our eyes, we refuse to allow you to have access. Or
Mm.
like in the UK, where it's very expensive to have access to many of these institutions just because of what the access fees are, they won't have access otherwise. And it's exactly the same in parts of the United States, right? Like literally, I did not grow growing up going to museums because they were expensive, other than the school trip that took me there, other than the discounted county museum I got to go to once in a while. I had no exposure to art. Is that what we want for people? Does that encourage people to somehow become part of us? And I mean, there's legitimate questions to raise. One of the issues that was raised about the article is, well, do we want them to know about colonialism or not, right? And so to me, the logic there is, well, that's a different whole other filtering mechanism. That's not about money per se. That's about which stories you want to circulate about yourselves. And the United States has exactly those kinds of issues, right? Are we supposed to talk about how slavery helped to build the very buildings that people make decisions in today? Or are we supposed to ignore that and just focus on the building?
Mm.
Yeah, I think the beauty of history is we can learn from the past and not
Mm.
repeat the same mistakes. So if we're not actually learning about difficult things, we won't change our behavior, and the same things can cycle back, unfortunately. I believe, art is for everyone.
Yes.
And I know there is economy involved. You have to support these institutions. They have to make some money probably, but there needs to be a way to enable refugees to have access, but also everyone. People like me, who I grew up underprivileged as well, and didn't have access to a lot of resources. I would have liked to also go to see, museums where I otherwise would not be able to afford that. I
Mm.
think art is for everyone. I think the diamonds in the rough often come from places you never suspect. The greatest, most genius artists are often in unsuspecting places. They're not always in elite areas. So, of course, I have a view that art is for everyone. It shouldn't just be only for people who are elite. Of course, the elite have played a role to purchase, cherish and save these valuable works through time. So they definitely have played an important role to put their money behind these arts works so that they can be saved and cherished over time, and then ultimately saved into museums, which actually was a democratization of art as well. Because before that, art was primarily held in monarchy homes and elite people's houses, and not in any place where people could actually see them, the common person. So, yeah, I think it's art is for everyone.
I think this is where the problem was in what they were reporting about, was that, why should it only be available to those who have just come into the country? And why can it not be released out or given that same opportunity to those who are veterans, or those who are pensioners, or those who are students, those who are not able to afford it? And I suppose, echoing what you're saying, Jerry, it should be for everyone. And
Yeah.
if they are going to offer these opportunities to refugees, then that should still happen for the masses.
Yeah. That's where the idea of universal access comes in, right? Like when you're designing a curb brake, okay, ostensibly it's for someone who's in a wheelchair, but it's also for someone who walks slow. It's also for someone who has a bassinet. It's also for someone who's pushing something from work, right? Like you design with as many people as possible, and that allows them to be as open then as possible.
Yeah.
How can we even say here's who gets access and here's no? If you have a protected class that you want to gain access to, well, there are other protected classes who also need access. In fact, why not just make it universal? Hey, instead of spending quite so much money on bombs, maybe spend just a few million, maybe £1 billion. I don't know, on cultural institutions, which have a much more rebounding effect.
Yeah.
right? It's not just about exposing people to art. It's that there's cafes that open next to these places. People come and eat, and people want to have jobs, and like it's a multiplier of people's interest in positive ways as
Yeah.
opposed to negative ways.
There are other ways to earn money other than the ticket price.
No, I
Yeah.
think in light of that as well, Josh, of course, art is for everyone, but refugees are in a very distressed state.
Yeah.
I think there should
Yes.
be ways that a culture helps people who are in such a distressed state to be integrated, to be brought into the culture and become part of it and be an active part of it, embraced, in other words, not put up barriers for.
100%. But I don't think that art is going to resolve that larger issue of the way in which the underclasses in various democracies are viewed and given access to, right? Like in the United States, this stuff becomes tremendously political, tremendously nativist. It starts to get ugly very quickly. And I would prefer to avoid all of that and just say, well, look, if this is something that has a universal connection for all of us, if it's part of our heritage, then all of us have access to it. I don't know who built the sidewalk, but I'm glad it's there. That's basically what it comes down to, right? And so it's just this basic decision as a society. Are you a culture? Are you a civilization? Or are you barbarian in a sense of like not caring what is left afterwards? I prefer not to, I'll be kind for Eamon and the censors. I prefer not to do number 2 where I sleep, because that's just not going to be productive for the future for me or for anybody else. I did good there. Come on.
You did very good. Well done, Josh. Well done. Well done.
Yeah, I think another aspect also is our understanding of our history and our culture should be the good, the bad, and the ugly. It should not be a whitewashed version.
No.
Even if it's uncomfortable for people, because we need to understand and know what has happened in the past, so we don't repeat those same mistakes again. They need to be straightforward. That's my view.
Yeah,
I agree.
So that's that tea.
That is that tea spilled. And now going from looking after
but speaking of
and being kind to the poor, now we have the complete contrast to that by Miss Lisa Schiff.
Yes. So this lady, so for those who haven't kept up with this has been like a big issue. This is part of the very thing that we're talking about in terms of the gallery collapse, right? Is that people that are dealers, people that act as middle people, anyone who saw 6 Degrees of Separation, the Donald Sutherland character there, right? Who's acting as the middleman between people with money. Well, that's exactly who this person was. And she was very well known in the New York art circles. And turns out she had to run up a Ponzi scheme. I don't think most people who end up getting busted for this kind of thing start off thinking, hey, I'm going to rip people off. What happens is their bills get ahead of them, and then they have to start using what's coming in to pay what comes due, and then before they know it, it's spiraled out of control, right? And so what happened here is that's exactly what happened. And so now she's got, I think the total is like 1,000 works. There's like decorative work, but there's also really high art, super collectible stuff, because of course she was facilitating transactions between people. Well, she'd start to facilitate, and then guess what? The transaction wouldn't end up being facilitated in the end. And so she's got a lot of artwork that's going to end up on auction. And the big deal is that people who like gave her stuff, they have a certain period of time where they can say, no, that's mine. Otherwise, it becomes somebody else's.
Could I just do that? Could I go up to the auction and just say, that's actually my Banksy? Oh, no, what? You can't sell that. That's mine. That's my Damien Hirst piece.
How good a forger are you?
Not very. Not very. They are hoping to recover up to $2 million worth to try and cover off her debts. But it's like, that's a lot of money. But then there's Judy Chicago, there's Damien Hirst, there's Richard Prince. There's a huge amount of very reputable art pieces that are going up for auction, and they probably will get it. But yeah, just another one of many different fraudulent activity cases that we've come across over the last number of weeks. I mean, there's loads of them.
Yes, the art market is rife with this, and I think it just speaks because it's the canary in the coal mine, right? Yeah. It just means that this is what goes on around us, and because there's so much money and attention, we see it here. What do you think, Jerry? Where are you on this?
Well, I'm primarily focused on the primary market, the whole secondary market, art as commodity. I don't have much experience in that area, so I'm not sure I can really comment per se on it, but I don't know. in some ways, the art as commodity kind of turns my stomach.
Yeah.
But it's a reality, you know.
So I think this is less about that and more that she had a business, right? And her bills started to get ahead of her. And so, like, you're opening a gallery, right? Would you shut the gallery down rather than start to have what was originally an honorable enterprise slowly slip into fraud, slowly slip into a Ponzi scheme, right? Like I'm saying, I don't think most of these are intended that way. Obviously, there are some that set up that way. Go on late night television, you'll see them. But I don't think this lady had a very good reputation for many years, right? No one intentionally runs up $2 million in bills or whatever the end up amount ends up being.
But wasn't it that there was a lot of like false advisory that happened?
Yeah. Yes, it's all kinds of shenanigans start because once you cross that threshold, right? It's like, well, geez, I got to keep the money coming any way I need to. Then it starts to become a con job, essentially.
Oh dear, just another one. But I'm with Jerry on this.
Sorry, Lisa.
I don't want to be dealing with any of those blue chip people. They're just it's a world that I just don't understand, and it's a world that I don't want to get near. Other than the fact that potentially it could actually fund all of our activities. But that's okay.
Sure. But as I pointed out before, it's a Devil's Wear Prada moment, right? Where it's like, this is how the blue filters down to the cheap $20 sweater you're wearing. It's the same thing because of the weight, the gravity of that part of the market. I can and have fully functioned perfectly fine without dealing with those people as much as I can, right? I sell my artwork, I do the projects I want to do, but you have to know that it's there, even if you're going to move around it.
Having that course.
I think that there are a lot of shape out there who probably don't have their own opinions about things. So a few powerful opinions can set trends and cause values of objects to go up incredibly. So that in some ways, that is less democratic, you know, valuation based on small numbers of opinions that go up into the stratosphere because it's, you know, it's a supply and demand issue. One person who's important says this is a valuable artist or piece, and now suddenly everybody wants it. Demand is increasing and price is skyrocketing for that thing.
Yeah,
I know you all already talked about NFTs in the past, but that was an issue with NFTs as well.
Yeah, same thing. But it's not about NFTs. It's the idea that like, capitalism is not democratic by nature. Capitalism is about haves and have-nots, right? And the only way I make a profit is if somebody else wants it, right? And so the whole idea is that you buy things that you know other people want. It's not about that you want it at all. That's why art and wine are in these safe areas, these warehouses that allow the avoidance of taxation, but the art never gets seen, the wine never gets drunk. That's not what that's about. That's about value and the accretion of value.
It's economic.
Cultural value is different than economic value.
Yeah. That's worth.
Something
worth and value.
Tens of millions of dollars and have very little cultural value.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
and also
100%.
Things can be severely undervalued and have great, incredible cultural value. So
yes,
we've also seen that many times on Spill the RT. Unfortunately, we still can't change the game unless we actually try to change the game. So we're trying to change the game, and with that,
speaking of which, tell us about Nua Collective.
Let's see what's happening. Nua Collective, we are a visual art community and we are home to 20 artists and hundreds of their artworks, which have fresh work added weekly to our online collection at nuacollective.com. And Scatter, our latest collection, is available to see right now. So when you're finished watching this episode of Spill the RT, head over to nuacollective.com to enjoy an array of beautifully made, unique art pieces made by our professional visual artists. Here you'll also find our newer journal featuring articles and podcasts, which are also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our beautiful print publications with our brand new Scatter publication highlights our collaborative collections, and they are also available to buy, which are perfect for your art book collection. So get on that, buy them, and that is a way of supporting everything that we do here at Nua Collective. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss us spilling the RT in our weekly roundups every Monday. Now, Josh, what have our audience members to do?
You all know what to do. This is episode 19. Episode 20 is going to be epic. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I'm telling you, it's going to be epic. Guaranteed. Like, share, subscribe, send to 3 friends. Your day will not be complete unless your mom knows about this podcast.
Your mom. And if your mom
Your
doesn't know
mom.
how to get onto YouTube, then show her.
Send
The
her a
mouse
direct
doesn't
link,
go on
damn
the
it!
screen, it goes on the pad. Just so you
How do
know.
I use this?
It's not the
Show
point.
her.
What's that thing that goes around the screen? Oh, look at that. Oh.
Moms love us. Let yours love us too.
Okay, and now the lunacy sets in, and as the lunacy goes away, let's go on to looking at our next story, which is all about money still.
Speaking of lunacy, but actually apropos of exactly what Jerry was talking about, right? So if museums are supposed to have this function of, whether we like it or not, making decisions about what shows up where, well, LACMA, for those that don't know, LACMA is an LA museum. It often gets itself into trouble in various ways. And this time it got itself into trouble because it had decided it was going to do this offsite project in South Los Angeles, which is in desperate need of redevelopment. It's been for many years. So they were going to put money into this. It was like an 84,000 square foot building. It was going to be this whole project. Turns out too much money. Sorry, can't do it. They pulled the plug on this. But at the same time, the artwork that was going to go there, well, somebody else put up $150 million in Las Vegas. And sure enough, guess where most of that artwork is going to show up. So sorry, people of LA, just like the sports teams, to Vegas we go because that's where the money is.
It's crazy money. Like, it's crazy numbers. It's outrageous. We talked about earlier about how we move gallery spaces to a more decentralized location so that we can give more access to bigger groups of people and so that we can make it a bit more diverse and that we can widen that net. And now it's all going to Vegas. I mean, okay.
Well, shouldn't everything end up in Vegas? I mean, all
Never
the world's
been,
architecture.
Don't intend to ever go there.
All of the world's architecture is there for you. You can have Paris, you can have New York. There's no reason to travel. Just go to Vegas.
Aren't China doing the same thing?
Well, yes, but if for China, those are empty places. No one goes there. True. But in Vegas, because what goes to Vegas stays in Vegas. Remember that. Where are you on this one, Jerry?
Yeah, I think there should be moves to democratize art, as I mentioned, in ways that is possible. Perhaps their model, they should be thinking a little bit more outside the box and not just try to plant the big monolith museum in the middle of a underserved area. That might not have been feasible. Using more creativity and being able to enable democratization of art, I think would be a good part of this. So it's sad to me that the project, which had a lot of possibilities, is not going to happen now. So hopefully that doesn't mean that won't ever happen again. But yeah,
it always happens to these sort of social enterprises where you're trying to kind of make a difference and trying to impact more rural environments or communities, and unfortunately, because the financial return is not always going to be as high as what it could possibly be in the more centralized areas, they're immediately going to see higher risk, higher issue, and then the whole thing just gets canned. And it's very difficult to figure out how we can kind of overcome that or go beyond that, and how maybe it could be sustained in different ways.
I think the problem is that it keeps getting visualized as we got to spend a tremendous amount of money when we do one of these satellite things. And yes. I come at it from an education perspective, right? Like, I have worked for educational institutions that have dozens and dozens of offsites. They do them in other places, do them inside of high schools. They do them in gymnasiums. They do them in whatever space they can use, because the point is not to spend a whole bunch of money and then enrich the rich people or the contractors and the kickbacks and all the nonsense that happens administratively in every city in this damn world. What they're trying to do is actually have that intervention in people's local areas, right? And so you can be neighborhood based and not spend a lot of money and still actually have impact. But that piece of, neighborhood based, that is what kind of gets left out of this, because they want to spend a lot of money, right? They got donors. They don't make those donors' tax bills go down unless that big lump of cash gets spent. And so, well, a bunch of donors, $150 million worth of donors in Vegas, that absolutely supersedes $25 million worth of money in LA.
Yeah, I think the model, there's I've seen now, like you all have an online collective the collective that's physical, where a large older building can be renovated and turned into artist studio spaces with large amounts of gallery showing space, can be really powerful. It can actually create a whole spark a whole kind of cultural awakening in an area, and really create a cultural education and interest in the local community. Something like that, which would be much lower cost, would probably have been at least a better start to get interest into something like this, that eventually could develop into something larger, more monolithic in the future. But to me, it seems just applying that one model into another place does not necessarily mean that model's going to work.
No.
Yep. And when we circulated our Blackout, our physical exhibition, we went for non-traditional places precisely because they attract non-traditional people who are interested in art, but who don't go to the high cathedrals of art. If you're trying to bring people in, go where the people are. Don't expect them to come to you. It's a pretty straightforward idea, I think.
And also something like that could give opportunity to local artists who may not otherwise have an opportunity to have their own studio. It could be very culturally powerful to do something like that, to really empower some really good talent locally.
It's trying to do that. Unfortunately, we do have the difficulties of having the limited access to resources that are financial. But when we have people and people who are willing to put things in together, I think that is sometimes all the resource that you need. And it's like that theory of effectuation, where you bring the skill sets together and hope that we can create something new from it. And I think if that's something that these people could taking on board, they don't need to spend 25 million. In fact, give me the 25 million, I'd make the most incredible spot in 10 different places, not just in one. And
100%.
that's the thing. It doesn't have to be so elaborate. Art is rough and ready anyway. We're ideas people. We're trying to make change, trying to see what could be made from something we're resourceful people. Creatives in general.
Stone soup.
Artists are scrappy. We make stuff happen,
Yeah.
We take what we've got and we just do it.
Exactly.
Stone soup is the most important story to learn, folks.
Yes.
It's about intention and making it happen, and the rest will unfold. It's not about money.
No.
Not about money.
And that tea is spilt. But before we move into our story of the day, sorry folks, but we have another scandal. And we love scandals here on Spill the RT, but this scandal is particularly delicate. It's about a number of artworks that were stolen in Tehran. And
well, they may not have been stolen. Let's just put it this way.
Oh.
So the Tehran Museum got contacted and was told, we're going to have this outside show and we need some artwork from you. And so can you please loan us 30 pieces? So they did, except there was no show. So is it a theft? Is it just weirdness? I know where I'm going with this one. But somehow in a place like Iran, which, monitors everybody for everything, 30 pieces of artwork valued at a lot of money, actually, $500,000, 300 billion rials, which is a lot of money in a place like Iran, right? Just literally walked out the door with no one even realizing where it was going. That was the thing. They didn't even, it left and there was no destination. It just into thin air, gone.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's a lot to think about in this, because obviously there's potential questions over where it went, if it went anywhere. Is there a government withholding of information here? Is there a kind of is there some sort of censorship that's happening that we're not being shown? And I don't understand exactly why they would do this, other than the fact that it's a monetary gain once again. But yeah, I take my hat off to those who.
What you think, Jerry?
Well, I think some of the objects were, culturally precious,
Yes.
like a whole collection of carpets that were antique carpets, for example, which is really an important part of their culture. So it's not just necessarily inappropriate works that are being censored, I don't think. To me, it sounds like it's probably just some crafty thief, probably.
Yeah.
So
and that's what caught my eye. That's what caught my eye, is right in a place that's known for this panoptic observation. Everyone's got to do everything. Well, turns out, guess what?
But also, and especially that sort of area where they're always trying to their own cultural assets, you know, preserve their cultural assets. It's like it's difficult to try and fathom where and why there isn't been either why there isn't any more kind of action to try and recover them.
Well, I mean, again, my logic is perhaps there's hollowness inside of the regime, and so they can't.
I think that, cultural artifacts and things that are important for cultural history and things belong to everyone.
They
So
do.
it's in a sense a crime against the whole culture, I
Yeah.
think. Hopefully those objects will be recovered and will be returned to where they belong. Um,
So the other
as
way to look
part of.
at that, though, is right. You're talking about a place that keeps that artwork from the larger world in general, right? So by being stolen and put into the larger world's art market, that art will actually probably be seen by people in a way that it might not have been seen otherwise. Because it's not like many of us are making our way to Tehran to go and see what's going on in their museums.
No, and I think we've seen this before as well in other topics where you're talking about this whole guerrilla activeness to try and get work seen that mightn't have been seen before. Um, but then to say is it right or wrong is the real question, and the fact that they have taken something that's an asset of the people and not of the people who stole it. So I don't know. Then
Art goes missing all the time in the United States. It's like a very common thing, right? So it's part of what makes the art market liquid is the fact that there is that slipperiness. What's interesting to me is when you're dealing with a state actor and they can't get their you know what together to be able to keep control of their own cultural heritage.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that tea is spilt. I think we can speak no longer about that tea. It's gone. It's down the drain. Okay, so moving into happier things, Jerry. Jerry, you have so many little strings to your bow. Give us a little introduction about what your background is, where you're coming from, and then we'll talk about your work.
Okay. I say, at first, I'm an artist, a lifelong artist, ever since I was a small child. My mother was an artist, my grandmother was an artist, so it's deep, deep inside of me. When I was in the process of deciding what I wanted to do with my life, of course, my family pressured me not to be an artist. They didn't want me living in their basement for the rest of my life. So I ended up going and pursuing a medical career. So I'm a medical doctor. I've basically been doing occupational medicine and public health for about 25 years. So I serve populations of people in different aspects, communities, workers, etc. So it's been very rewarding. And I also recently had an opportunity to start an art gallery with three other physicians who are also artists in the San Diego area, which has been really a fun learning experience. We just launched back in June of 2024, and we're doing shows about every 6 weeks where we're featuring local California artists, national level, and as well some international artists as well. But some really interesting and cutting edge art that it has been brought into the gallery and being shown. Um, Lastly, I also have recently just started an online supplement company and a health products company. So I have my hands in lots of different things. So, but my art practice ultimately is really an important part of who I am, and it's kind of how I have processed the stresses of my life. For
Mm.
many years, I was kind of in the closet as an artist. Nobody knew. I just did it because I loved it on my own. I had stacks of work stacking up in my house, but I didn't really at that point really feel like I wanted to show anyone.
Mm.
About 5 or 6 years ago, I actually went through a personal crisis. Um, Having had a lifelong history of suffering with depression, I went through a suicidal time, and it was very difficult. But during the time of recovery from that, I came to realize that the things that are important in my life, I need to do right now,
Mm.
including building, prioritizing friendship, including practicing my art practice and making that a real thing, not just private to myself. So my art practice now has, from that point 6 years ago, I started kind of going public. It evolved eventually into being in, shows domestically, internationally, um, being able to sell my work domestically and internationally. I eventually decided I thought I wanted to do an MFA in art practice at the School of Visual Arts, which is where I met Josh. I finished 1 year of that and then decided, I think I want to start an online company instead. So I didn't finish the degree, but it created some great connections. I would say in the past few years, especially since starting at SVA, they really got my head turning and focused in a different way on my own art practice.
Hmm.
I actually had never turned my lens towards my own medical practice before. Because for me, art was like an escape from that. I didn't want
Yeah.
to think about it when I was making. Um, so it really helped me to kind of. I just had this light bulb moment. I saw it was actually a Toba Auerbach uh, show at the Museum of Modern Art, I believe, and it was so poignant because her work is very involved with science.
Hmm.
She's a physicist and an artist, and she brings a lot of physics concepts into her art, and it just caused my brain to explode. Like, I suddenly hit me that I need to show my medical experience in my art.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the turning point for that. I started really pointing my lens towards, some of the traumatic experiences I've had in the healthcare profession, some of the ways I've seen humans being degraded and objectified. And so my practice is not only just to show that, but to try to humanize and to try to bring back a sense of dignity to people who are going through disease and death, et cetera. I also think a lot about life and death. I think about a lot about, I'm a very spiritual person. I think about spiritual topics. So I'm always asking questions that kind of include a lot, kind of a mix of all of those different things, if that makes sense.
My goodness, that's incredible. Firstly, and I think we'll unpack a couple of those things in a sec. But I think while you're so like passionate about talking about your artwork, let's just look at some of your pieces. So
Okay.
the first one is this piece. Would you like to just describe or just tell us about this piece?
Yeah. So during around maybe following the time of COVID, I was really starting to think about um, honoring and humanizing the COVID patient. So the work was really around thinking about how when you're unconscious and on a machine, you are like an object and your body is almost merging with machine. And so it's asking this question of what is life and what is death? And we're on this edge when you're in that state where you're not really alive and you're not really dead. So this whole series is called Edge because it's about that edge of between life and death. This piece was a later on in that series. I probably did around 20 of these different works. This is of an ICU patient. I painted it in such a way that it's abstracted enough that many people, when they see it, they don't really see the image, and then suddenly it hits them that this is an ICU patient. Where you, the viewer, are being forced to see the face of the person. This is trying to humanize that person as not an object; they're a
Mm,
person.
it's incredible. And then we have this piece here.
My practice around looking at healthcare started to kind of evolve where I realized that a lot of the topics I was thinking about really had to do with me, myself. So I started rendering myself as the patient and the doctor. And in this piece, this is actually kind of a tongue in cheek, kind of symbolic about how I have felt in medicine. This is the
Mm,
ancient practice of bleeding, where in the days of old, physicians used to literally, they thought they were going to get bad humors out of your body by cutting you open and taking the blood out of your body. To bleed you, they thought they were going to cure disease. Most people, if you did that, would die because you need your blood to live. So this is kind of this kind of symbolic image of how I have felt in the healthcare profession, like I'm being bled, like my life force is being drained out, in other words. But it's not just me, the patient, but I'm also the doctor doing it to myself as well.
my goodness, that's a lot of self-reflection there, Jerry.
It's a little bit horrific there, but yeah.
And then this longer piece, which we have a few detailed shots of, I'll start from. So it's kind of like in the comic strip sort of
So
layout here, but I'll just show you the first
this
half of
piece
that piece
is
here.
is actually very large. This is a piece called Five, And actually, it was a reflection of my own life, one panel for each decade of life, my
Wow.
5 decades. So I'm actually tracking in this work. So before I say all of that, I will say I love data. And
Mm.
despite like being an artist, I also have this whole like creative scientific side. And I absolutely love getting into data and solving problems and tracking things. So I went through this whole process in a very scientific way of tracking my own history of depression. So this piece is showing my life as if it were a graph of my mood over time, decade by decade, and kind of almost like a autobiographical mind mapping of different key things that have happened through my life that have kind of influenced my mood and how that I have been able to heal through that as well as have downtimes and uptimes. So that's kind of the gist of the piece. The piece was also designed to be almost like the Doppler effect. So each panel is getting wider and wider in an escalating, accelerating way. In a way, I love the concept of Doppler and energy. A lot of that theme is through many pieces of my work. But also, I feel like in my 50s now, I I feel so much like I have gone through so much healing that my life is accelerating. It's getting so much better now. I've really had some hard times, but have um, have been able to accelerate into the current. The deep dive there on the last panel was that uh, suicidal depression episode that I had about 5 or 6 years ago.
How large is the total piece?
I believe it is 128 inches across and around 30 inches tall. So it's like the size of a wall. It's like 10
Right.
feet wide, and it's fairly large.
So about 300 centimeters for those using
Yes,
the non-normal way of
it's
measuring.
probably 3 meters, maybe more than 3 meters wide. Yeah.
So when you got to the end of this piece, what I love about this overall is how you have documented your journey, but also expressed what is the power of art therapy and how you can really kind of process so many different things through that. From the end of this, you talk about how that brought you into your depressional state. Was there a resolve piece, or was there something that showed you for now, or
I think I touch on that a lot throughout my work. I think the thing that really, if you notice in the fourth panel here, the line is rising up in general because I went
mm,
through a real healing time and went through fairly deep counseling for multiple years and really worked through the realization that I did not. I'm a very sensitive person as an artist and didn't know how to forgive. So once I learned that process, it was like my many of these issues kind of dissipated. The most recent was a setback that happened 6 years ago, but I think that actually served a good purpose. It kind of helped me to recalibrate, decide what my priorities were in life, and kind of move forward from that.
amazing, really amazing. Wow. Um, this piece then, which is this was this done after that or in your
This
timeline?
was done when I was at SVA actually in the summer of 22. I actually had this kind of, when I'm first thinking about some of my own experiences in medicine and now turning my lens towards that, I saw this. I don't even know the name of the artist, but it was a Renaissance painting. I think I probably saw it in the Met of St. Peter being hung upside down and crucified and tortured,
Mm,
and my brain automatically went to a surgical theater where surgeries are happening. And so my brain kind of connected this torture situation with what it's like to go through surgery. And so that was the original idea behind this piece. As the piece evolved, it kind of became something else. It really is asking the question about, so for one, the viewpoint of the piece is as if you're high up looking
mm,
down at the body of the person. That's symbolizing the spirit of that person is now looking at their own body, in other
wow.
words. So it's asking the question, is there a spirit? When we all lose our consciousness and die, what happens? So it's kind of trying to peel that back and understand it. There's different symbols here. For example, the lighting of the surgical theater starts to evolve and become almost like a rose window in a Gothic cathedral, for example.
Mm.
The surgeons that are around the body, there's that we call it the op site, where the piece of cloth that is up, so it protects the sterility of that site. You almost see the bodies that are there operating have almost faded away, like we're kind of merging from physical to spiritual in this piece. Um, so what's real versus what's not real is kind of, there's a play on that. And then of course down below, the bed of the person laying on is almost like a bottomless pit. So it's like it's this heaven and hell concept, in other words.
It's the fall. You
Asking
know, it
that question.
feels like the
Asking that
fall.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And then there's this. The final piece that we'll share today is this piece, which it just looks like a ray of hope. But
Yeah.
it's gorgeous.
Yeah. This I painted probably around 25 different pieces in a similar vein. I had never done landscape before. I was very focused on more abstracted and figurative and expressive work. And I saw a Richard Mayhew exhibit. I believe it was probably in the MoMA again. And his work, he's a Native American who imbued the spirit into the land. So when you see his pieces, landscape, they're almost alive and breathing. They are
Mm.
absolutely gorgeous, and I love. They just impressed me so much. It inspired me to want to create some more atmospheric or landscape pieces. These works actually came from, as a physician going through the COVID pandemic and how much chaos there was. As well, during that time, there was a lot of unrest and people were screaming for justice. And so I was trying to understand, what is justice? What is justice in a world that where it's almost even ambiguous as to what's even right or wrong, in other words.
Wow.
So this piece is really trying to understand justice as atmosphere. And so this play between light and dark is kind of this symbolic metaphor of when we go through really hard times in life, the light often pierces through. So the light and the darkness are interacting as a storm, kind of storm. Uh, like the storms we go through in life, but ultimately the light pierces through. We'll get to justice. It's kind of the main concept of the pieces.
Brilliant. Amazing. Amazing. Jerry, that's been a journey, and you've had a journey, and it's incredible just to see that little selection of your works, and to see how far you've come from. I think something that's really just a kind of a slight takeaway, is how you as a person in the medicine world in science, and how people often state that that side of the brain can't bring yourself to the creativity. I always found that statement challenging because I know how there are so many ways of accessing that, and you were a proven example of that. To see that you can really use art and use the creative world as well as the sciences, to work in tandem and to make a difference and to be and to share a voice. And I think that you've done that so tremendously well there. I think it's stunning work. So
Thank you so much. It's actually, I feel it feels quite empowering now to even be able to talk about my work, because 5-6 years ago I never, no one ever even knew. So it to be so vulnerable is not necessarily easy, but it actually feels empowering for me. I feel like, as a physician, and an artist, if we're not vulnerable, people often see and think that other people have it all together, but the truth is we're all in the same boat.
yeah.
With people, everyone has different struggles, and I think it can really give hope to people if we actually talk about different issues, like struggles, like mental health issues. People, you can work through it.
Mm-hmm.
There's hope, in other words.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an important thing for me.
Well, certainly, Jerry, you're an inspiration to those Emily Dickinsons out there who are like, no one wants to see this. No one. It's the quite opposite, right? The more that you put it out there, the more positive response you've gotten year over year.
Yeah.
So thank you very
Yep.
much. Great
Absolutely.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you so much for joining us. And just before we wrap things up today, Jerry, can you just a couple of things that you are operating, excuse the pun, at the moment, is just to kind of put some links out there for people. So your gallery, what is your gallery called?
So because it's a partnership of 4 doctors who are also artists, the gallery is called Level of Service Not Required. The reason for that is because in the insurance industry, we are all slaves to get paid by insurance, and we always have to judge every patient we see based on the level of service. So
Wow.
we're saying, as a gentle jab to the insurance industry, level of service not required here, in other words. So it's called LOS not required, or full level of service not required, both on Instagram as well as on the website.
Brilliant, cool. We put the links to that in the bio. And for your art practice, then, how do we get to see more work by you?
So my art website's easy if you can spell my name, which some people have a hard time with that. Strohkorb.art. So JESTROHKORB.art.
And if, like me, you have a problem spelling that sort of a name, you'll find the link in the bio. So, in the bio. Great. Thank you, Jerry. You've been an absolute pleasure for us and for our audiences, and we hope to see you again to talk about more art stories and to see more artwork by you in the future. It's very exciting. Thank you so much.
It's
Josh,
been a great pleasure for me as well, and I really appreciate it. I just want to tell you all that.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Right,
Josh,
that's great. Thanks, Jerry.
what have people to do before we sign off today?
First, you got to ask for swag, because that makes Eamon giggle, and I love when that happens. But then you got to like, you got to share, you got to subscribe, you got to tell 3 friends.
Do it.
You got to think about how your own life will not be complete unless you've shared the wonder that is spilling the art tea with as many people as possible. Think of us as a mind virus, but in a positive way. We inoculate you against the insanity of this world, and what we give you instead is a way of understanding and appreciating things in a way that nobody else can provide. Do it. Do it. Do it.
Are you okay, Josh?
Oh, I was just channeling something. I don't know.
Well, go to that place once we're finished recording and stick with it. Namaste. Thank you very much for that, Josh. And with the swag, we will see you all next week for our 20th episode of Spill the RT. But until then, have a very good week and stay creative. That's all for now, folks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.